Thank you for coming to the Swartz podcast. This is our third episode. We're really excited to have everybody with us today. And that's going to be Andre Sobral. Say hi, Andre.
Hi.
Hey, he's from the Swartz Institute in Brazil. And he's going to be talking about the January 6th insurrection in the lens of Aaron's political writings. And then we're going to have Tracy Rosenberg come on from Oakland Privacy and the Swartz Police Surveillance Project. And she's going to be telling us about some crazy facial recognition stuff going on in California. And then we're going to have Grant Smith Ellis talk us about some revenge porn legislation that he was able to get passed in Massachusetts. So that's what we're going to talk about. But anytime you can ask questions, ask how things relate to Aaron, sort of like, stop, wait, but how does this relate to the paper that Aaron wrote in 2003 about the thing or whatever? Just ask the question. We can't wait to answer it because answering questions is really half the fun for us. So I am going to very quickly tweet the link and very quickly publish the link. And now, everybody. Okay, so the links are tweeted and on the website at aaronswartz.org. And I will let Andre take it away. Andre.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to share my screen now.
Great.
So you can see the beautiful slides I made. So is it good? Okay.
Looks good.
So this is a series that we're doing now, the third episode, about how Aaron had this way of thinking about things that are somehow hacker position, maybe a point of view that's different. And we are choosing this year because of the election to talk mostly about politics. So I had this subtitle, Reimagining Politics, as a way of thinking Aaron in a different perspective in this sense. And I introduced myself a few times, but I have a new thing to say today. That is, even though I'm a sociologist and have this master's and PhD in computer science engineering, I will be soon joining the Karsh Institute of Democracy as a postdoc researcher. It's the next 2 years, so I start in August, and I'll be part of the Digital Technology for Democracy Lab in the University of Virginia. It will be a very interesting stay at the United States. So I'm very happy to do that.
We're very excited about that. Yay.
Yeah.
All right.
And if you want to support the Aaron Swartz Institute in Brazil, this is our contact and PayPal. So let's dive into the topic. The Capitol insurrection, the 6th of January there, and the 8th of January here in Brazil. I will explain this a little better soon. This topic emerged with a conversation with Lisa, where we were talking about how extreme things got and how this event that marked the United States history is also something that we fear that may happen again. So she asked me, are we ready for another one of those? And when we think about reimagining politics, we can also reimagine it for the worse, not just for the best. So if we have Aaron as an example of something interesting we can think about and imagine politics better, we can see our politics now and think of how we can imagine it worse. So this is a historical date that shows how worse it can get, and it's just a piece of it.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, we like to sit around and imagine the worst. It's just that historically so far, that's the path that certain entities have decided to take. And so it seems like it just makes sense to prepare for the worst. So they say, hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
That's true.
And that's exactly where we're at. Just to explain why I really wanted to do this. All right, thank you.
So why do we think that this is the worst or going through a bad direction? Easy to answer with 5 dead and 138 injured, but it's a lot more complicated than just this kind of data. We can think that when you say there is a political movement to invade a public building like the Capitol, and it has the name March to Save America, it is pointing to different political views. It's not the same understanding of democracy or participation or even the civic role that we should have as citizens in the United States or in any other country. So we have this almost picturesque image of this guy with tattoos that evoke an Europe ascendance or descendants, and this Native American hat that doesn't make any sense with everything else. And this is like aesthetic identity that the movement had, with a lot of shocking images and a lot of strange garments, almost like their costumes. You want to say something, Lisa?
No, I'm trying to think of that guy's name, but we'll do it later. He has a name, but I'll look it up. Go ahead.
Don't worry. So when Lisa asked me, are we prepared for another? My answer was like, we already had one. 2 years after the 6th of January in the United States, we had the 8th of January in Brasilia, the capital of my country. So this is a photo of the moment of the protesters invading the public building, the seat of government in Brazil. They also attacked the Justice Court and the palace of the president. So they broke windows, destroyed work of arts. They even did things that are unimaginable when you're talking about politics, like taking chairs and doors with the names of the politicians and taking to the streets, using the bathroom in the middle of the room over the Constitution, things like that. So it's kind of hard to picture this as political movement, but it happened.
It was a political movement, all right. Yeah. All right, keep going.
So if we think about consequences, 2 years later, we have 890 found guilty in the United States, and 1 year later, we have 116 found guilty in Brazil. But there's a difference. In the United States, Trump is still a candidate, while in Brazil, Bolsonaro, the former president, is now ineligible. So he can't run for office for at least 8 years, and he's still facing criminal charges that will soon be over, or we will have a verdict. For now, we are still waiting. Like Trump is still
so there were consequences.
Yeah, there were consequences. More than 1,000 in each of the situations are still waiting for being judged. So there's still a lot of things going on. It's not really the end of it. But there were consequences, and most of the people that were punished in both cases were the people that were involved in the destruction or the protests. So it's not like they're actually investigating this as well as they could, even though they are investigating it. So we're going to find out in a few years, probably. I think it's too slow, but it's what we have. And then we have this, why is Trump a candidate and Bolsonaro isn't? It's because in Brazil, we have a justice court that is dedicated to electoral matters. So the electoral justice system has the Supreme Electoral Court that has this mixed composition. There are judges from the Federal Supreme Court, judges from the Court of Justice. There is this Constitutional Court. It's like a tribunal only to judge matters of the Constitution, not all matters. So there is no criminal things or anything like that. And we have 2 lawyers that are indicated by the class association, so like the order of attorneys. And this composition helped to convict Bolsonaro and make him ineligible, because it was 5 votes against 2. So the 2 votes that were helping Bolsonaro to get free of these charges were the ones he indicated. And in the United States, we have the Supreme Court as the only justice court that will judge this kind of things. So the Supreme Court has a problem that the president appoints it. And we have 6 appointed Republicans and 3 Democrats today in the American Supreme Court. And there is no mandatory retirement age, while in Brazil we have at 75. So is this something that we should be thinking? Like, how old is too old for a judge? And can we actually have this impartial or somehow able to judge everything court? And it is always appointment by the president. So it becomes a problem of how this political system is imagined, how it's designed, is not just about if you like or you dislike a president.
Right. I think it was that way on purpose, though. The problem with any of these courts is that they can be compromised, right? Even the election court that did the right thing with, with Bolsonaro, at least, could be compromised on another issue or something. You know what I mean? That's the problem with just having a court. The point is, we don't have any say. The people don't have any say in either case.
Yeah, that's true. It's in the political science, it's considered a power that is conservative by nature. So the judges are like people that are not really the same citizenship level of everyone else in the country. They have many privileges, many different experiences of the democracy or of the society they're living. So there are people that are detached from the normal concerns of the populace. And then we have this question: what is the concern of the populace, the citizens, what they're thinking? And we have this popular opinion of the January 6th. And this is from 2024, so it's recent. And 22 approve and 78% disapprove. And if you think about Republicans only in this research, you have the approval rating in 2021 at 21%, and now 30%. So the approving rate is going up with time. And the disapproval also varies, but the strongly disapproval fall a lot too. So there is a rewriting of history, of discourse about what happened. And
yes, it's the fastest rewriting of history that I've personally witnessed.
Yeah, it's very concerning because if Trump's win again, this is like a vote of confidence to do it again.
Well, again, it won't happen if Trump wins. They're only going to do it if Biden wins. That's the point.
Yeah,
they won't do it if Trump wins. The whole point is to mess with Biden. So if Trump wins, there's nobody. That's the people that would attack January 6th. That would attack the Capitol like on January 6th. So there'd be nothing to do. What are they going to do? Attack themselves? So the issue is that hopefully, if people vote, because that's the big problem here in America, is that if people don't think it doesn't matter and don't vote, then Trump could win. But if people vote and Biden wins, then Trump's not going to just go away, right? He doesn't do that. So we still have the after election stuff to look forward to. And to prepare for. And that's what I think we need. That's what I was thinking is important, to actually go back and talk about what really happened on January 6th. Since, like you said, it's really the discussion of it is it's almost treated like the way, Grant, our producer, was talking about that on YouTube, they stick the Wikipedia article at the top. And they just treat everything like banter. They just treat everything like hearsay. So if you're unless you're an actual news channel, like a BBC or a Washington Post or whatever, which is one way to do it, but it sort of actually just silences all the independent journalism on the topic and doesn't really deal with it. The idea that independent journalism talking about what really happened needs to be treated like people shouting at each other, on an independent podcast about it or something. I mean, you would like to think that one could be treated, level playing field, right? But then if that's the only way to stop all the garbage, all the disinformation and misinformation about January 6th that YouTube was probably barraged with, so that's what I was hoping to be able to just have people thinking about it enough to where we're more ready, right? Because last time, the last two times, we weren't ready. We weren't ready for what the Trump election was actually going to mean. And I think people have forgotten that too, to a certain extent. And then also, but again, not talking about, not trying to make this a political show telling you who to vote for, only talking about the past, the historical aspects of what happened. So you will think about that when you do hopefully vote at the end of the year. So that's what we're hoping for. So again, these polls, I said this when you showed me this before, I hate polls if you can't find out like where the poll, like I can't even tell if these polls, okay, CBS News. So the polls literally mean nothing, and they can be twisted to say whatever. And so you never know if, but I think that this thing on the left here does accurately kind of represent what it seems like from my perspective, in that the Republicans don't think it was as bad, like it was such a bad thing. The Democrats always disapproved, and maybe they go up or down a little bit or whatever. But the point is that it's not the violent aspect, the attack on the physical well-being of members of Congress that took place is significantly underplayed, in my personal opinion. That happened. The fact that members of Congress had to be rescued, basically, from the Capitol in broad daylight while there was a crowd banging on the doors trying to get in, that's a serious thing. And it just doesn't seem like it's really being handled that seriously, even by our own administration, because we don't like to make a big deal out of stuff. We don't like to freak people out, right? So we've got one side that loves to freak people out. They freak people out every chance they get because it helps them control things. And there's the other side that doesn't want to freak people out, even when they should sometimes, when something has actually happened. And between the two, I think that you have a whole population of people that just don't really want to think about it, don't really want to deal with what happened, because that would mean maybe you have to do something about it.
My arguments about the election is that if you have now Biden in power, there is no slow transition. If he's elected again, it's easier to defend the Capitol. But what does it mean if a president supports this kind of action, maybe even pardons people that were involved in it, and then is elected again? So you have a precedent that is very concerning for a democratic government, in the sense that if the people that are elected, as you said, the Congress was attacked and had to be removed by the security to be safe, and you then re-elect this person that caused this situation, it's a very bad message to the political system as a whole. I think it's even more concerning than just he trying again after losing the election, And I don't know if this is something that we can be so confident in saying that it will happen again if he is defeated at the voting, because the problem is, does the electorate of Trump is as radicalized now as was before? Is this the real question we have now?
More so.
Yeah. And what is helping them to be more radicalized? I think this is the main concern that we should be aiming at for the moment. But let's keep talking.
That's a whole different thing. Yeah, we're not gonna do that today. It's a whole different thing. But again, so go back to January 6th, and the thing is that it was because we were talking about something really important a minute ago. Oh yeah, so in terms of, I did want to flesh out the scenario that you were suggesting a little earlier, that I wanted to flesh out my scenario first, so I did, but now I want to go back to yours, which was a scenario where you're saying Trump could get elected. And hold on a second, just to make the thing for a minute, so we can just talk about this for a minute. So you're saying that Trump could get elected and still pull some shit on January 6th, but for different reasons. So tell me what you're thinking along those lines.
Historically, we have this concern in Brazil about populism. That is, when a political figure uses the authority that he has among the public, the people, to force or strong hands, try to convince people to do his bidding. So you have this strong man or strong figure, a charismatic person that takes people to the streets and try to pass everything he wants against the other powers, like the justice system or the courts or the Congress. So this is like a precedent. When you have a country where someone is able to use the populace against the other powers, you have the first step towards a dictatorship or strong, how can I say, the concentration of political authority that is very bad for democracy in the long run.
So you're saying because technically the reins wouldn't have been handed over yet, that doesn't happen until January 20th. So it is still an attack on the last administration if you were to do an attack on January 6th when Biden hadn't left yet. Is that why he might still do it? Or what is he going to achieve when he's already won the election? Just to kind of like tear Congress up a little bit on the way in?
It's a show of force. It's like they also talk about the honeymoon phase. When a president is elected, you have almost 100 days of easy dialogue with the Congress, because it's the moment there is more clear that the people want that person as a president. And then if someone is elected and has this history of using the people like that and put on a march in front of Congress, it's like he's menacing the other powers. He's trying to like convince them to go with whatever he wants to propose.
So again, what would he be gaining? If he stirs up too much shit before the 20th, he won't get inaugurated.
He could like write a very strong plan of propositions, things that are unpopular now that he would like to change in the America, like things about, I don't know.
You mean once he's in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about before he's in.
And use, but he can use the people to make a show of force and pass those things, because he already did that, and we saw what happened, and we know how dangerous it is. So
and I do believe that too. I think he would come right back and literally like not have missed a step. We haven't been able to reverse everything that was, that happened. We're still sort of picking up the pieces, which I don't understand, frankly. I don't know why it's been 4 years. He should have had that shit put together now. But so again, what is he going to gain by stirring things up on a January 6th attack, though, if he has won? I'm still perplexed by that question.
He doesn't need to do an attack like the last one in the sense of destroying things.
Okay, you're not saying that
if he does a demonstration and fill those spaces with people,
because he's probably going to do something, right? I mean, no matter what, there has to be something just to celebrate it, because for them it's a happy holiday, not a sad holiday. So they're going to celebrate it, and you can't just, then you're just, that's just protected political speech if they're gonna have a rally or something, right? That's not doing anything, and we don't have anything against that. It's doing it at the Capitol while you're breaking in, right? That we're against.
It was called March to Save America. Stop the steal. So imagine the power of mobilizing all those people through other points that he thinks is important to pass, like appoints more people to the Supreme Court because he thinks this will help America to be great again, or banishing immigrants, or anything like very hard to pass now, but
all the things he promised that he would do.
Yeah,
if he was elected, right? He's talking about Mein Kampf, and he's not hiding what he is planning on doing. So it's interesting that I was surprised. I don't know what else to say. I thought he was going to take the route of the whole, like he did last time, where it's sort of like, I won't be that bad, because basically people bought that shit, right? He won't be that bad, right? And I was like, whoa. So I thought maybe he would go back, because we're so stupid. Americans will forget. It takes about, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe. We'll cancel somebody in a second and they'll be canceled for life. But with politicians, for some reason, we forget every couple years. I don't know what it is. It's the strangest thing. I've never seen anything like it. So again, even with Trump, it seems like people are forgetting. And so, I'm just trying to remember. It's also for myself too, because it's like that happened. right? Like we lived through that, you know, that happened. And so it was really interesting because when you're talking about it, we should go back, show the shared screen again, Grant, so we can go back to the talk. But the reason thing that's so interesting is that a lot of these analyses, of course, were done way before any of this stuff happened. This time I got to show the screen again. And that's what is so interesting for us is that he's predicting a lot of things, talking about the trends and things that could happen that, of course, you know, have happened. So go ahead and continue.
So we had this same thing in Brazil, and the popular approval, it's way smaller, but the trend is the same. If you look at this bottom corner here, Lula is the current president. Even among his electorate, the people that approve what happened, the invasion of the politics center of Brazil, or capital, it's doubled from 2% to 4%. And in Bolsonaro electorate, or Republicans, they went from 6% to 11%. So what I'm saying is that we have this very efficient machine of changing narratives now. And we have to think about what people see and what we think when we are talking about these events. So I looked for articles and things written about these events, and I found this interesting piece on Anthropology Today, volume 37, number 2 of April 2021, that narrates these anthropologists that were on site on the day doing a field work.
Oh, cool.
They were looking at the marsh and taking photos and taking notes. So the funny thing is,
anthropologists. Go on. I just love that shit. Real time anthropology. Like, I hope they don't get hurt. Go for it. All right.
No one imagined this as this extreme political march when they saw those people. As I said before, they were like in costume, most of them. There was this spirit of a joy, a celebration. They put in the words, the anthropologists, a complex carnivalesque amalgamation of joy, playfulness, and seriousness. So these people, half naked, with costume, with wigs, with this colorful facade, it's very hard to think they're going to.
So the decoy, if you will, the decoy was this political theater, and that is how. And I knew people that I cut ties with immediately because I was like, I couldn't believe it, but they were going there. They had already said things in the past that worried me, you know, and you kind of brush it off. And next thing I knew, they're texting me pictures from January 6th with the guy, QAnon shaman. That's his name, by the way. Literally, somebody I know like this around fucking QAnon shaman. I just like, oh my fucking God, I could not believe it. And they still didn't realize at that moment, they were not aware what was going on. Absolutely not. That crowd outside did not know what was going on. And that's, and to do that is like such brilliant planning on their part. And that makes it a lot harder to punish people because you're trying to decide, you know, who was just there for a protest and who was in on it. Right. And it makes it very complicated, you know, so yeah. So it absolutely seemed like good old fashioned political theater. Not something that the right is known for historically. But it seemed like it was going to be a no harm, no foul kind of thing right up until that day, you know, and because I remember, because we were kind of wondering what was going on, you know, all you knew is that people were flying over there and stuff. So, yeah.
So this theme of everything is possible and nothing is true, it's almost a motto, an idea that's very present in the minds of the people that were there. Like they were in a historical moment, they were living the thing, they were celebrating, they were like in enjoying themselves. They were not really thinking of violence or destruction. Right? So how this happened. And then you have the anthropologists talking about this religious component of the protest. It was a carnival whose overwhelming Christian symbolism demonstrated the devotion of its celebrants to a sacred cause. So this is common here in Brazil too, you know, or demonstrations of the January 8th. There is a lot of political symbolism mixed with religion, like Jesus would be on our side, or this is a martyrdom, like a sacrifice we have to make to save the country, to save the good people, you know. So this is almost like a change in tone. it's not as playful as before when this kind of rhetoric comes in. And then you have the disinformation working with this kind of protest to make it more appealing and to hide things that may be ugly. So this conversation the anthropologist is recording, that one woman is saying, "We the people had entered and seized the Capitol building." So she's like in awe of what happened. And there's another older woman at her side that says, "Oh no, that's Antifa, the anti-fascists. No? They must have infiltrated our group and are trying to give us a bad name." So there is this conspiracy theory that anything bad that happens is not their fault, and anything good that happens is because they are there. So there is this dissonance where people are at the same time denying and supporting what's happening. And this happened here in Brazil too. The same kind of accusations that the left had infiltrated the violent protesters in the march. And they are destroying that. They're not right-wing people. It's impossible. So there is almost a denial to the thing happening. And then we can look at the leadership and what they did. And in Brazil, there is even more now investigations that are showing up with documents saying how Bolsonaro wanted to do a state coup. And he was talking with the military and he was trying to get things ready to do that. And he couldn't do. But in the United States, we don't have the same documentation about Trump doing that. But we have his speech. And his speech, as the Associated Press wrote down, he said, "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. And we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to the capital." So it was an inflaming speech. It was a direct message to these people that are so caught up in this narrative, in these conspiracy theories, that the president can't say it exactly as it is, but he is giving us signals. Let's interpret it then. Let's try to understand what we have to do. Let's do a sacrifice to make it happen, you know?
Yes. Not really that subtly either.
It's something that he can go back after and say, "Oh, I wasn't really meaning that. Oh,
I meant this." Yeah.
So it's on the edge of the knife there.
Yeah.
And I have these authors that I wish to bring to help this discussion. Karen North-Cetina, it's a sociologist and a woman that studies a lot of the internet and how it affects politics and security. And she talks about how these networks of communication, the cell phones, the internet, they're making what she calls effects of disproportionality, in the sense that few people with this organized campaign, they can make much more impact in the world than at the past. So she even compares to the terrorist attacks on the 9/11, like, how can these people living in the other side of the world orchestrate this attack in the American soil? And there were so few terrorists. There was not a very big organization. There were like 3, 4 in each plane. They were so coordinated. So she's trying to come up with how these structures empower some people in a sense that can be dangerous. And if you look at the campaign, like Trump campaign and Bolsonaro here campaign, we can see a lot of people that were engaged as a full-time job in creating disinformation, propaganda, mottos, and spreading these things. So we had here in Brazil this app called WhatsApp. I don't know if in America you can even find it, but people use it a lot here, and they were used to make big groups and share this fake news like wildfire. It was crazy. So everyone had someone from a church or someone from like professional organization or any kind of social gathering, and they were adding everyone to share this kind of fake news. It was like very organized, and they reached everyone very fast. And we have another contribution here of John Law. John Law talks about how we construct the idea of reality. So how can these people be so convinced there are Antifa in a crowd destroying the Capitol, and it's not the right-wing people. It's because what we assume as reality, it's just something that we understand by gathering information from different sources. So we're not doing experiments ourselves. We're not like proving reality to be true all the time. We're trusting people. And these kind of movements, they use a lot of capital, political capital, to make people believe in certain figures of authority, like Trump, like some other people, like QAnon, or these are narratives. They're constructed to convince people. We have Edward Said, that's another anthropologist, and he's talking about how we create the idea of the other in his work, Orientalism. So the right-wing voters must not only vote for Trump, they must imagine themselves as another people, the true Americans, or the true defenders of the country. So to do that, they must create people that are seen as different or strange. They can't really empathize with their mothers or daughters or anyone else that votes different. So how they do that?
They have to other them. They have to otherize them. Yes.
They create these villains, like the trans people that are in the bathroom and they're trying to attack your kids, or they have to create this almost imaginary ideas.
What is it? It's completely imaginary. It's not almost. It's completely imaginary. Yeah.
Sometimes especially, they have this head herring to say, "Oh, that happened once," but at the same time, it's absurd.
Yeah, it didn't happen once, though. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, this one didn't.
Never happened. It never happened, except I think with one of the senators that was trying to prosecute, that was trying to get the bathroom legislation passed. Yeah, and so it's this otherizing, whether it's the trans community or whether it's immigrants, or I know it's the same. It's the same. Women, we get othered. Anybody's fair game.
Minorities.
If you're not a white male, you're fair game. A lot of the time, and it's still like that. To a certain extent. So tell us about the Benedict Anderson connection.
And Benedict Anderson is another sociologist that is thinking about how we create these communities, these imagined communities, in the sense that you have a soccer team. They're not the same people, they're always changing, but you have this identity of them as something united, Like, why do I cheer for them? Why do I care if they win or if they lose? Because there is this culture that's constructed to do that. So this is applied to this idea of the protest. Like, they must create this image and identity that is aesthetic, that is discursive. So they're always working on creating these phrases, these terms, these color schemes that people can identify other Trump supporters. We had this joke here in Brazil that if you have a photo of someone and he's using shades in a car, they are voters for Bolsonaro. There's like a lot of people in this same image, So they're always working to create this identity to be sold as what is the supporter. Like, we use the American flag as a banner or as a cape, or we use this kind of tattoo, or we use this kind of rhetoric when we're talking. So that if someone says that word, it's because he is Republican, This is an effort of creating the campaign, the movements to convince people to participate in these kind of things.
Yeah, I like the sunglasses thing, actually.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, actually. Just to be like, I voted. You just put out a selfie that day with your sunglasses on, and they know that you voted,
You know how crazy this thing got? In Brazil, we love soccer. And our soccer uniform, the yellow t-shirt, it's like a symbol that always were used as something that we were proud of. And since Bolsonaro, he co-opted this, he stole the shirt and started using in every electoral speech, every demonstration. And now people are not wanting to buy it anymore, the shirt of the soccer team. So it had a huge hit at the World Cup. They're trying to use the blue one more, the second uniform, So this is crazy thing. How can something that's so loved can change so much because of the political use and how they really organize this. You know, it's not just spontaneous use of the shirt.
Was this a state team or a country team, or
the country team? The Brazil country team, the soccer team.
Okay, so it was probably pretty easy for him to appropriate that then, right? Because if he was president, he was running for re-election, right? So he was able to do what he wanted.
It shouldn't be. He's not the soccer team of the country. He can't say that the other people that vote in his opponents are not cheering for the same soccer team. It's like it was a national thing.
Say it. Yeah. But I'm saying, I mean, that's the point. Is of course he can say it, you know. But it's interesting to me that it did backfire, because even the people, even his supporters, didn't like kind of bringing the team into it. It sounds like it just got creepy. Just after the January 8th that happened. Before, they weren't really that concerned about using it. But people on the left were looking at this thing happening and were like, how this can be, we can't use our soccer team anymore, or shirts anymore. Yeah.
But that's the crazy thing that I'm trying to say, that how can you steal the national symbol? Imagine if tomorrow Trump would start to say that only Trump voters celebrate the 4th of July, and then everyone else that's voting in Biden can't anymore, you know?
But yeah, but I mean, they do actually say things kind of like that around patriotic times, right? Because the left isn't patriotic enough, no matter what we do, and also the fact that and the thing that I believe you can be, I think it is patriotic to be supportive of immigrants. I mean, the whole country started as immigrants, you know, and a lot of the things that are seen as anti-American, I actually think are very much American. And it's just whether you want to embrace all the different kinds of people and everything like that, and the things that make it cool, and on a good day, they're talking about that stuff, trying to get their vote, right? And then the rest of the time, these are second-class citizens. You tolerate them, right? You let them exist or whatever, but we all know that they're not really as good or whatever, right? Like it's that whole philosophy, you know. So, all right, going back to Aaron.
Yeah, I talked a lot without Aaron's support.
Yeah.
So find what Aaron had to say about those things. Of course, Aaron didn't talk about the invasion of the Capitol, since it didn't happen yet. But we had interesting text of him about the theory of change. So Aaron is talking in this text about how we can imagine a different politics. And then he has this phrase that is very interesting, that people want to make the world a better place, but they don't know how. How is writing a letter to my local paper going to stop the polar ice caps from melting? I think this is kind of resonates with us, since we are looking at the global warming getting more intense, the climate change, and we don't know what we can do. Is recycling or not using my car all days, or writing a letter or voting something will change this global phenomena? And we can also think politics like that, in the sense of, how can I make the world more like what I want if the politicians that are on government or running for government don't really propose that kind of things that I want? So it's like this idea of how we can capture the political imagination of people. Like, how can we believe that something will change if we participate in politics? And that's a very good question. And it's also a very good slogan. Like, yes, we can. It was this Obama slogan. Is a very strong way of saying in politics that you know what you want and you can do that. You know, it's not like out of reach. It's not just writing letters. You can go and change it. And of course, this text was written before Obama was elected. And when we're thinking about how Aaron imagined these things, he was like, Aaron was a Democrat. He actually spoke a lot against the Republicans in his text. And he was like, imagine, how can we engage people in politics? How can we create something that the people can look at and say, we done something different and we changed the world, you know? And he was like problematizing this notion that something is missing. He says in his text, they seem to expect that some kind of miracle will happen. They're missing the concrete steps between the actual way we get from here to there, in the sense that the world has no shortage of big problems, but it's hard to think of ways we might realistically solve them. Instead, the same things, vote, preach, march, get trotted out again and again. So we don't know how to change the world, and we are doing the same things, and things are not happening. So what we do, what's the miracle that's going to happen, how things are going to change? And I don't know if you have an answer to this question, but Aaron tried to give one, and we're going to try to get there now. So he first imagines the problem is that politics is way too compromised with money. So people are rich, control the politics, control the country. We have to change that. And so he imagined, how can we do that? So he imagined we can use the internet to elect people that think like us or want to vote in things that we agree with. So he called it the Netroots Congress. And he says, the problem of elections is that the person with the more money gets elected every single time. So this is actually in political theory. Most campaigns that have bigger funding end up with the candidate elected. Not all of them, but most of them. So it's very hard to go and run for a mandate if you don't have the money to do that. And I imagine that you can use the internet to raise with lots of people. I have this news from 2012 talking about how Obama used small donors and the internet to get the money for his election. So it's almost like Aaron was proposing things that were going to be used a lot in the future. And then he tries to explain how this worked. Concretely, you'd ask people who want to do this to sign up to pay a fee a month. Then you go around looking for candidates who really believed in the progressive principles. So at that time, Aaron is kind of ignoring the party politics and just focusing on the idea that if you had this independent candidate with our ideas, we could get him there by giving him our money or her our money. And then he had this same idea that people were engaged because the politicians talk too complicated. It's very hard to identify what they're trying to say and what they're proposing if they're speaking in terms that you don't understand. So he says, instead of raising money to run ads, we do a PR stunt that will get lots of free media and word of mouth attention. Center a campaign around a clear proposal that most of the public will support, but no other politician would dare to touch. Be forceful and refuse to back down in the face of attacks from the press or your opponents. And above all, always make it clear to people that you are an average person and not an average politician. No boring speeches, no political buzzwords, no meaningless cliches. So Aaron, unfortunately, is describing Trump before Trump.
Exactly.
Because the wording like build a wall or things like that are very simple, very concrete.
In all fairness, when I was 8, I still had my nouns agree with my verbs and I wrote in complete sentences. Okay. So I stick up for the 8-year-olds when I see this headline because
it's unfair to them.
Yeah. I would argue it's not really fair. It's not really about what level it just shows that even talking gibberish that people can only understand parts of gets across more than these hoity-toity, you don't want to use, and big words are generally bad when you're doing public stuff. But I was just saying, by the time I was 8, I was definitely writing in complete sentences. We were doing those little diagrams. We had this thing called Schoolhouse Rock here in the United States. And we were already diagramming our sentence parts and things like that. So the idea that you couldn't, that he's just talking, it's worse than that. It's not just that he's talking in, and broken clock, right twice a day. He's actually right about talking at a more easy to understand level. And so talking at the level of an 8-year-old but with complete sentences is actually what you want. We usually shoot for 12 in these weren't not political campaigns, but in other types of campaigns when we were trying to do something with activism. We shot for 12 years old. Yeah, because really, also, if you're thinking about people that they're only going to read the first paragraph of an article, or they may only see the headline, or who knows, it's important to make it simple and at the top. And if there's something that has to have the larger words, just put it lower down, because it'll be for those people that already read through it.
People don't want to cheer or fight for the elites, the people that are rich or the people that are very powerful. So they must see the candidates and associate with people like them. So we fight for the downtrodden or the underdog, And this is a very convincing way of putting yourself in politics. And Trump does that very well. He's a millionaire. He shouldn't be seen like that, but he plays this part of a simple person, a man like any other, that speaks his mind and has
more like you. He's more like you. But I'm just saying, he's trying to say he's more like us. He's just like us. He's just a guy trying to get by, that doesn't want to be pushed around by the man, Yeah. And so go on.
So this is very interesting to see how Aaron try to say that do PR stunts, like make something that will shock people, that will get media coverage. And Trump does exactly that. Like, instead of just spending a lot in campaigns, he's always doing outrageous declarations or doing stupid things or creating arguments or fights just to have the attention. So it's like
he gets the free publicity that way.
Yeah, free publicity. Yeah. And goes to the small mouth too. So everyone is trying to talk about those things. It becomes like, in Portuguese we have fofoca. In English is like the small talk, or no, it's not small talk. The word is escaping me. Like when you're talking about the life of someone else. So the sense is that it becomes a popular topic in conversations. Even if you don't agree with him, you're just going to talk about how shocking he did something. And this is happening in Bolsonaro election too. Everyone was like, every week having some kind of argument about him doing something stupid or something crazy. Like he tweeted, "What is golden shower?" It's like, why did you do that? This is crazy. You're the president. Stop that.
Just to get everybody talking about it.
Yeah, just to cover up for other things that happening, that he didn't want to get attention and that he wanted free media. So we have this idea that these people became public figures in a way that is way worse than TikTok influencers or YouTube rich channels. It's like they live for the image, the propaganda, and they use this media to propose, to try to reach the wider audience. So if you look at the case in Brazil, Bolsonaro had this team of people that were living in the Congress, creating news and mobilizing people in the internet. I don't think that Trump was very far from that, because it was Steve Bannon that taught Bolsonaro to do that. So you have this graphic here of the user counts of selected right-wing favorite services, and Facebook was way bigger, and Telegram and Twitter. So we have these other social networks that were created to escape censorship or restrictions on the way you can use them. But at the same time, you have this unstoppable force of trying to reach people all the time. And it's funny because Aaron was talking about that before. He was thinking, like, it's so hard to find out what politicians are saying or who I'm going to vote for. Imagine if there was a site where you gave it your email address and zip code, and every time there was a local election, it would send you the progressive candidates to vote for. And in practice, these social networks not only spread fake news, but they promote small politicians of right-wing view. So if you look at the composition of the Congress, many of those people that were elected were just newcomers that were helped by these strategies Steve Bannon made. In Brazil, that happened also, like YouTubers, right-wing journalists, people that were like nothing before became celebrities and were elected. And I have here
weaponization
Rick
of the fear and the
Perlstein
resentment
talking
and
about
anxieties
right-wing
about
politics and propaganda.
the social changes that are happening in America that eventually, become accepted parts of American life. But when they are introduced to the scene, like the idea that gays and lesbians should have the same rights as everyone else, they're terrifying, right? And you can kind of use that terror to kind of frighten people into voting for candidates who, come into office and do things like, cut taxes for corporations, right? So that's a playbook that they've run again and again and again. And you read what conservatives were saying in the middle of the 1930s when Social Security was first propounded. They said it's going to destroy freedom in the United States. If you look at what Ronald Reagan said when Medicare was first propounded in 1961, and he, recorded a record album for the American Medical Association to lobby against it. He said, if this passes, if old people get free health care out of Social Security, we'll be telling our children stories about what America was like when it was free. You heard the same thing about what happens if African Americans are afforded full civil rights in the South in 1964. The same thing you heard in 1977 and 1978 about whether gay Americans receive full civil rights. It happens. The changes are frightening at first, but we eventually accept them as part of Americans' birthright as a free and equal nation.
So why is Rick Perlstein here? Because Aaron was reading him the book Before the Storm, talking about politics in America when he was writing that text that we were talking about just now. So Rick is trying to show in the interview how there is a pattern of acting and how they create these issues that are non-issues and make them the center of fear-mongering. So people will vote for someone that will stop that. Like if you paint the immigrants as a menace, something that to be feared, like the immigrants are going to invade the frontier, there's always this video image that they show of a lot of people trying to climb the wall or fence or running the desert. It's like those people are going there to kill everyone or to rape the woman, or these are people looking for jobs and desperate and hungry. They're not people like invading forces. They're not an army. They don't have any weapons with them usually.
Right. It depends how the story is framed. If you're framing it as whatever horrors they have just escaped from, from the wherever they came from, right? Then it puts it all into a different perspective. So it's just how that whole thing is spun. The one thing that I still just, it's like demonizing, whether it's immigrants or people of color, or the trans community or women. Again, we were doing so well, and now we're just kicked back, and we get kicked around like everybody else again. And it really is I don't know. We failed somehow at making it like there was anything to be lost by giving other people rights, right? The fact that we're still able to do that in this country in this day and age is a little bit disturbing, that we wouldn't have. And 9/11 helped a lot, but it's more than that, So go ahead. It's about 3 o'clock. Go ahead and finish up, and then we're gonna have we'll have Tracy come on from Oakland Privacy.
I just wanted to point that Rick also says that these people are elected and cut taxes for millionaires and things like that for corporations. And if we look at these discussions about identity politics, race, or gender, or abortion, they're mostly used as moving things to get people to vote, to identify with a cause. But you also have the politicians being elected and proposing tax cuts and giving bailouts to companies that are way over in debt. So if you look at the pandemic, there was this helping checks on the mail, but there was trillions of dollars to help the companies, big companies, instead of the people. So this is like the thing that is being disputed is not just the imagination of immigrants or women or what is America, but also money, also the economy. So this is a way bigger battle than it looks when we think about those things.
Right. And that's your point, right? Is that they're using the fear mongering is over here so that you don't notice with the other hand that they're cutting taxes for the rich or whatever. That's the point, right? You know, and
bailing banks.
Bailing banks, doing all the things that they say they're not doing, you know, kind of thing. So continue.
So Rick Paulson, he said, America was becoming a different place from the one they thought they knew. The best measure of a politician's electoral success was becoming not how successfully he could broke people's desires, but how well he could tap their fears. And this I brought because I wish to provoke the audience to think, what was the last thing the politician that I voted for talked to me about? Was it something to be concerned about or something that I could actually be happy to be happening? That it's almost telling when you look at the speeches, the campaigns.
Well, if everything's okay, there's nothing for them to do, right? They're supposed to be coming in on the white horse and fixing everything. So you have to be talking about the problems that you're going to fix. You can't say everything's great. You don't need me. I just want this job so I can have power. You know, they can't just say that. So, yeah.
How is our time? I have this small discussion about voter and patterns that I can leave for other time, or I can just go on. I think it's a good place to stop if we're having time concerns now.
Yeah, you want to just do that? Why don't we pick up? I think that would be perfect for next week. We'll just pick up on that, and then you can like elaborate and going on that, and we'll get straight into the voting stuff. And that's actually part, that's part of the main reason. One of the main reasons that we're doing this, everybody, is just so we can have these discussions, think about these things, leading up to the elections. So it's not just, it's election time and what's happening anyway kind of thing. That was the idea. So go ahead and stay on, and we're going to have, now we've got Tracy Rosenberg. Hi, Tracy. How you doing?
Tracy.
Hi, Lisa. Happy to be here. And good to see you.
Great. And you were telling me about, so you're with Oakland Privacy and also our police surveillance project and lots of things. And you sent a really funny email talking about how you were forced to use a facial recognition ID system here in California to try to submit a grant, and it didn't work. And you have an olive complexion, not much more than I do, and not really even. So they were saying, it's only for the really dark faces that there's even any problems. And this just goes to show it's anything but completely white. There's
definitely darker skinned people on the planet than me, for sure.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, it was a little bit eye-opening. So just for a little bit of background, Oakland Privacy is not a 501c3 nonprofit, but I operate one, which is called Media Alliance. And one of the things that we do is we can pay the bills and keep the lights on is we fiscally sponsor other projects. So one of our projects, it's a great project. Lisa is familiar with it. It's about open source, decentralized storage for human rights archivers and documentarians. So we support the project, and they got a grant from the State Department. So we needed to get into a database and file reports and all this stuff. So they sent us to some government database called PMS, which is apparently operated by the Department of Health and Human Services, but for some reason the State Department, or this part of the State Department, uses that thing. So
Okay.
I logged on, did all the normal stuff, set up two-factor authentication, blah, blah, blah. And everything seemed fine. And then all of a sudden, one morning, I got an email from them. And they said because of unexplained problems that had been occurring, and they called it, fraud problems, everybody in PMS had to switch to ID Me, like right now. And they weren't kidding about the right now, because I went and tried to log in the normal way, and I couldn't. It was ID Me or nothing. And I knew about ID Me because Oakland Privacy, which, houses the anti-surveillance work that I do, have been pretty active in a campaign to try to get the IRS to stop using ID Me for facial recognition, because that was their sort of ID authentication method, and it has all kinds of problems. And we were sort of mostly successful with that campaign. They made it kind of optional, but like I was literally like on the record fighting against the use of ID Me, and now I had to use it, which was like great. So we talked to the State Department and was like, is there any other way not to do this besides the fact that we are philosophically opposed? We're like literally on the record fighting this. We really don't want to do it. Is there like any option? And because it's government, the answer came back, no, there's no option. So I had to sort of either do it or, potentially cost my fiscally sponsored project a lot of money, which I didn't want to do. So I thought, all right, I've got to do it. I'm just going to have to kind of buck up. And I wrote to ID Me and said, look, I don't want you to keep my information. And they said, no, if you want us to delete it right after we authenticate you, we can do that. I said, okay, great. So I, got myself all psyched up to kind of go through this process. And lo and behold, when we got to the selfie part, I took a selfie and submitted it, and it came back, we can't read your selfie or something. So you think, okay, something technically kind of glitched up. I did it 9 more times. So they rejected 10 selfies in a row. And they looked, just like this. I mean, like, here I am. I stick a cell phone up to my face. This is what I look like. And, I knew all of the criticisms of facial recognition quite well, that it basically makes dark-skinned people disappear, and that the 3 sort of, problems that it had, the most sort of statistically that they could observe, was dark-skinned people, women, and youth. And of course, I fill 2 of those 3 categories, sort of, but like not that much. Like my dark skin is really pretty minimal as dark skin goes.
Yeah.
There's so many shades of skin that are darker than mine. And, maybe potentially, I have fairly kind of deep set eyes like some Mediterranean people do. And that might've been an issue. But it was so unexpected because, and this is sort of what the interesting part was, I had always sort of othered the people who would be identified by facial recognition in a flawed way, that the system wouldn't be able to recognize or identify or would misidentify. It was, those people, and it was terrible, and we should fight on their behalf. And lo and behold, I am one of those people.
Yeah. So, what happened? I mean, it didn't work. And
it didn't work. This involved multiple days of talking back and forth to, support desks and everything else. And what they actually do, if you are like a facial recognition failure, which I guess is what I am now, is they get you onto a Zoom. And I assume that they, take a picture of the Zoom and record it and sort of have that forever. And then they have you hold up various pieces of identification sort of on the Zoom. Like, so you like.
And look at it. You mean human, they do human facial recognition.
So your face and your documents are like on the same Zoom. And then I assume they basically keep a picture of it or some such thing.
Okay.
Which is not great either from a security point of view. I mean, it's pretty terrible. But again, I was in this sort of bad position. So I did that. And then I filled out some form basically saying that they would get rid of my stuff post authentication, which I don't think they really will, but I filled it out. And life goes on. But it was just sort of an interesting moment. So I told you about it.
Yeah, and
I
it's
guess
just
that's what got me here.
so it doesn't work, and they must know it doesn't work because you can't be the only person that's having to do these Zoom calls, and the Zoom calls are not secure. Like that, the idea that that's the fix, to have a person holding a picture on a Zoom call is like ridiculous. So I just wanted to bring more attention to because this particular scenario is so ridiculous. And again, this is like what is there to do to even attempt to have this remedied?
Well, you are right. I was really surprised by like how low tech the answer was and how sort of, I don't know what the word is, high school it kind of was, right? It just, it didn't seem like the solution to technological failure, what we were doing there. It just seemed like a dumb thing to do.
Well, and it completely ignores the fact that the system is not working.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it can't, and it has to be making all sorts of other mistakes if it's not working for, you know, like it's just sort of like, oh, we're just, so it's a perfect example. It's just like bureaucracy. It's just like bureaucrats wanting to get their job done and not really caring if, you know, anything is
the ID.me rep that was doing this sort of, you know, compensation session with me was just like, A, she was bored to death, and B, it was clear she was doing this like over and over and over again, pretty much like all day. So I could see this parade of people that were also facial recognition failures. And
yeah, you're not the failure. The idea that they call you the failure, you're the facial recognition failure. It's not our system that's fucking up. It's your face that's the problem. You know, that's like,
and it was totally disappointing because, you know, for years I did that whole thing where I stepped aside at the airport and like made a spectacle of myself and like didn't do it.
Yeah.
So to the best of my knowledge, this was the first time I had been in a situation where I had to do it.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Andre?
It's interesting that they sell it as an exception to the rule, the facial recognition not working. But at the same time,
everybody needs the fix.
But they have a person to do the interview, and they have a process to be done. So it's not really that exceptional. And how they did choose to do this, to choose this system, the facial recognition, if they know that's not working very well. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
There is no evaluation of the system. There's no trial phase, or they did it anyway, even with so many people getting to be the exception. You know?
Yeah, and it's getting to be where, you know, and we've been seeing this for years now, you know, where with these systems that don't work, like the bail algorithms or the, you know, it's all the same thing. It's a system. It doesn't work. They have fixes for it. And somebody somewhere gets to have that report where they think it looks good that says they've got a bail algorithm system, you know? So it's like, in reality, this thing that's screwing everything up is supposed to be the thing that got somebody promoted or whatever. There's such a disconnect between like what the technology is actually doing and what it's being touted, you know, as doing. So
they keep saying that technology, they keep saying technology is going to improve and it's improving, and okay, it's probably improving from where it started out. But the whole idea that, you know, a couple of percentage points of error, and I guess I am now like the 2% or something with the 98% success rate. Yeah. Those are real people. And when
failures,
when we make these, you know, portals of access into important systems, like it's a problem that like 2% of the people are.
It's a lot of people
can't get in. Yeah,
or billions of people. Yeah.
Right.
All right. All right. Cool. Anything else exciting in the Oakland privacy land world? Anything particularly ridiculous that you have encountered in the last week or two that you might bring up while you're here?
Oh my God. Well, a number of things going on. As you know, we do a lot of, you know, local activism about surveillance, and I have a couple of stories there that I can tell. I'm also really enmeshed in the state legislative process this year because we try to go there to make sure they don't like pass incredibly stupid,
crazy shit. Yeah.
Laws. And and if you don't pay attention, that's what seems to happen. So, so a lot of that. But just in terms of sort of our local stuff here in the Bay Area, we sort of had like 2 things go down in the last week that were kind of interesting. One is the Alameda County Sheriff, who I know that Lisa is familiar with in all kinds of ways, which is one of the largest sheriff departments on the West Coast. Everybody talks about the LA County Sheriff, and in no way am I taking aim at any of the negative experiences with the LA County Sheriff, but Alameda County is probably second or third, you know, right after them. And they've got all this militarized hardware and operate one of the biggest jails on the West Coast, Santa Rita,
like to play
and not
war.
very well.
Yes.
And too many people die in the jail. So we were able a couple of years ago to pass a state law that talked about militarized equipment, core military equipment, which is why I'm kind of bringing that up. And it wasn't like we were able to ban it, like what should happen, but we were at least able to get some transparency processes put in place. So now every year they have to go through this dog and pony show of telling us all of the grenades and
purchases, all of the purchases,
militarized vehicles and Bearcats and stuff and assault rifles and all this stuff that they're holding. You know, how much have they got and how are they planning to use it?
Because they're not always buying it. That's the problem. It gets given to them. It gets, or there's some foundation will buy it for them or some shit.
What is their inventory? Like how much of this stuff have they actually got and how often are they pulling it out and using it? Or,
and on whom?
Parading it on the streets or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
They do occasionally bring one of their tanks to a street parade. So I'm not joking about that being one of the uses. But anyway, so one of the items that they have is drones, lots of drones, like a couple dozen drones. And years ago, we had worked with them to make a policy for the drones, but we hadn't really looked at the policy in like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, a lot of
So it's now part of this militarized equipment law. So they brought the policy out, and lo and behold, this is what happens when you don't check. The policy was not exactly the same as it was when we had signed off on it back in like 2015, 2016.
Oops, what happened?
Well, there was a new line which had been added to the purposes. And so there's like a list of purposes that they can use a drone for. And most of them are, you know, somewhat reasonable. They include missing people who have like fallen into canyons or are lost in kind of grasslands, some stuff around fires and trying to find if people are inside of burning buildings. You know, the sort of things that's like, okay, we can sort of
a reasonable list.
Kind of rationalize
that list.
But not, for example, flying over protests, taking pictures of old people that are there. That's not on the list. So we had this list, and then all of a sudden there was like bullet point G at the bottom of the list. That then there was no bullet point G. And bullet point G said, and any other use authorized by the sheriff. Which makes the whole list completely meaningless. And so we had to do some forensic detective work. We found out this was added in 2022. Which was right before the sheriff at that time, Sheriff Ahern, actually lost his election in November of 22 and became gone. But right before he left, same year, he somehow managed to put this thing in the policy. And it appeared that no one had signed off on it. Like it didn't go to a committee, the board of supervisors. It didn't go to the supervisors. It wasn't publicly displayed. He just sort of did it in a closet, more or less.
But distributed it with that new bullet point added?
Well, they people checked it in the sense that they put it up on their website in like a page of policies that literally contains thousands of pages of text.
But are the cops really going to be looking up on the website about their own policy?
Of course not. Of course not.
Oh, okay.
And of course, the public is not going to read the entire Alameda Sheriff Public Policy Manual, checking to see if they changed one sentence in one policy. So of course we didn't. But the change was just, it was terrible. It was appalling.
Did you get it pulled out or what? Did you get it removed?
As a result of this inventory process, we said, holy crap, how did this get there? They never really answered that question. We had to do our sort of own forensic
depended on the guy that left. I mean, you know.
But happily, they did, at least verbally, under pressure, agree that they would take that sentence out now. And so we are waiting for the brand new policy that does not contain that sentence. But I was told it would appear. The old one is still on the website.
Okay.
They said it would come in January, not there. They said it would come in February, not there. Then we get to March, which they had actually said January or February. So I sent a pissy note.
Who is this
what
we're
I
talking
got
about
back-
talking to? This is the
Yeah, and what I
sheriff's
got
department?
back was, well, we didn't really commit to any specific date. And I was like, oh bullshit. Because the interesting thing, I can say bullshit on this podcast.
Oh,
right?
you can say much worse than that on this podcast.
I can say worse than that. And you know, the funny thing was, like, don't they realize these meetings are on video? Like, really? And
So
they were
you
like,
have
we didn't
them
agree to
on
any specific
video
date.
saying that they would take it down immediately.
So I made a clip and sent it all over the place and said, basically, here you are on video saying it would be January or February. It's now April, or, you know, it'll be April momentarily. You haven't done it.
Yeah.
Please do it. And don't act like that when I ask you, because I have reasons to ask you why it's overdue. So I got an apology.
Oh,
But
wow.
I don't yet have a revised drone policy.
But you don't
so
have
we're
it
halfway
fixed
there.
yet.
Nope. But I got an
they'll
apology.
give you the apology. I mean, that's no problem there. But I'm sure it was a really nice apology.
It was a fine apology. It was a fine apology. Like I said, halfway there. But this is what advocating with local government is often like. You know,
It is.
like
It
a
is
clown show.
often, and especially with you, it's really interesting at these surveillance hearings where it's often during a city, you know, a city hall meeting or something, that are recorded. And you and I have gone through the transcript and sent people the transcript to remind them of what they said on numerous occasions. This is a trend. This is what they do because I think they might get away with it half the time. So it's worth a shot to just stall and pretend you're going to do something, and maybe they forget about it. Maybe they don't know how to make you do it. And it's really, you know, you're at a real disadvantage just being a citizen. You're a real disadvantage. You're an actual activist that people have seen you get things done. They kind of like, you're known, I think, at this point as a bulldog that's kind of not going to just go away. So at least in this case, and even with you, when there's somebody that they know is not going to go away, it's worth a shot to just blow it off for a while. You know, when it's literally a 2-second thing to remove that line from the website, right? It's like,
of course. And they're making it sound like it's, you know,
has to be approved.
It
doesn't have to be approved. It was never approved to go up there.
It's not even supposed to be in there.
It doesn't need to get approved to come down. Yeah. So,
but
all right, what's the other story you were going to tell us? And
well, they assume 90% of the time that you're not going to be enough of an asshole to go find the video, clip the part where they said
you're not being an asshole. You're not being an asshole.
Send it to them all. But
yeah. But again, why are you?
I will do that.
You're not the asshole. They're the asshole. No. They're the ones that screwed it up. You're not the bad guy for pointing it out and having it fixed.
Sure. But I said, realistically,
act like you're the pain in the ass for doing it, but you're actually the good guy. That's what I'm saying. It's
but
like,
they're assuming that most people won't do it, and they're probably assuming correctly.
I think most people won't do it. That's why it's so great that you will cover it. You know, I think the landscape in California would be a lot different if you weren't sort of, a watchdog. You're literally a watchdog watching the bills as they go through. It's really interesting. To sort of see that process. Yeah. What was the other story you were going to tell us?
Okay. One more local activism story.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do we have a couple minutes?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Okay. So AC Transit, this is also Alameda County where Lisa and I both live. These are the buses that that do the local streets. So that agency decided they set up a rapid bus service.
This is AC Transit.
Yeah, it's called Tempo, and it basically runs on International Boulevard in East Oakland, which unsurprisingly is a neighborhood filled with Black and brown people. And so they set up this rapid bus that runs all the way down this long street, and they decided they wanted to put cameras on the platforms.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Which was like, okay, there might be reasons for that, for safety issues, but like, what are you going to do with all the video? Are you going to keep it for 100 years? Are you going to give it to the police? Under what circumstances? So we had a long negotiation with them.
Yes and yes.
Where We talked about, okay, you can give it to your local police, but not to other police without a court order. You're keeping it for this amount of time and not that amount of time, and so on. And you're going to do an audit every year to tell us if you're following your own policy. So they passed that. They passed it unanimously, I think, after like a significant amount of argument. But lo and behold, we never checked to see if they did the audit. So it's been about like 3 years. And a local gadfly who runs the Oakland Observer, Omar Yassin, and if you're in the area and you don't read the Oakland Observer, you should, because he's doing the kind of detailed coverage of City Hall that like the East Bay Times stopped doing a million years ago. So anyway, so the Oakland Observer, he decided to do a public records request. He actually lives out along International Boulevard.
Yay, public records request. Go on.
For that audit. Guess what? They wrote back and basically said,
yes,
they forgot to do it somehow. But that now that they had his request, they would do it and they would send him a copy if he would wait like a month. So they did it. They sent it to him. He printed it when he got it, and he said, well, they appear to be only following the video release instructions in the policy 50% of the time. Or basically, they didn't follow them like 47% of the time.
By their own audit, they didn't follow them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did
they had an audit done by their audit division, and it said basically, we're screwed up at least half the time.
They flip it
all right.
The sides.
So do we have another case that we need to talk to our lovely attorney about? Or
we
what's going on?
don't, because I saw that and I thought, well, they need to like fix this. So I wrote to the board member who had helped us to create the policy, and I said, could you do a couple of things? Could you take this audit, which I guess the Board of Supervisors hadn't really seen until it appeared in this article. Can you take it to the board meeting, put it on the agenda, have a discussion about it, and can you like ensure compliance going forward? Because otherwise, yes, we might sue you. And they did. And we just had that on Wednesday night at 5 o'clock. They duly put it on. We duly took it off consent. And then lo and behold, the whole board, much to my surprise, basically said, we have to fix this. This is terrible. Why aren't we following our own policy? Why didn't we get this audit? Why wasn't the audit done? It was interesting to see that there was so much support for.
Was it
there,
support?
There was so much support, at least like in public, real? For the thing that they forgot to do.
Okay.
For years.
Okay.
So
and what are they going to do to fix it? Yeah, but they do a lot of this shit and they still don't fix it. They can say, oh, we're so bad. Bad me. And then it just like nothing happens.
What they promised, which is what I asked for, is they're going to do an annual report every year with the audit, bring it to the board. So they have to do it. They're going to get a 6-month interim report, and they're going to fix the logs and up the compliance records. I said it should be up over 90% immediately.
So and 100% dump all that stuff they should have dumped.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so they agreed that they were going to do it. Now the proof is in the pudding because we had the policy. We thought that was good, and lo and behold, they didn't follow the policy.
So when do you?
So we have to wait and see what actually happens.
Double check on them.
But it's an example, at least, of some sunshine, essentially uncovering a lack of diligence, a lack of following the policy, and potentially a commitment to do better. We will have to see.
And this is Alameda County?
This is
about the rapid bus.
The bus agency. And this is about the Tempo rapid transit buses that go down International Boulevard. And they have those, like, you've seen like those Tempo platforms. They're like kind of white. They're in the middle of the sidewalk and they have these little flags. And it's for the rapid buses. She drives, so she doesn't know.
What about all the other
person? So I know.
What about all the other
cameras all over them
that they may or may not be following if they're not following that one?
Well, the interesting thing with AC Transit is this is really their only privacy policy that we know of. They have cameras on the other buses, but at least to date, they've never been willing to do any sort of formal policy agreement. But with these Tempo things, partially because they don't just capture people on the buses because they're on these sidewalk platforms.
Right.
So they might capture people driving by. They certainly capture people walking by.
Right, right. But I meant not AC Transit. I meant this is a county of Alameda issue, right?
Yeah. Well, no, AC Transit is an independent agency. It's a transportation agency, and it's their board of directors.
Oh, interesting. So wait a minute. So none of the other surveillance policies for a given city apply to AC Transit? What are you saying?
No.
Because it's not cop cameras, because it's not City of Oakland cameras.
It's not City of Oakland. It belongs to the transit agency. So it's their buses, their equipment. You have to deal with that.
So it's a private.
It's like BART. It's like BART. BART doesn't belong to the counties. BART belongs to BART.
Okay, so it's this weird, it's like a private entity that does public, that plays a public role or something?
It's a public entity. It's a public corporation. But it has the responsibility for all of the AC Transit activities. And what happens at the City of Oakland and in the County of Alameda doesn't directly impact them. They have their own policies, their own board, their own structure.
So any other agency that has cameras like the airport or, yeah, right, has their own policy and their own retention. Those aren't considered City of, in this case, Oakland cameras. If they're at the airport, those are airport cameras and there's an airport policy.
It's a little complicated depending on the relationship of the agencies, but that
can be different for every city. Okay.
Yes. But that said, yes, in most cases, these are semi-independent entities. They're part of, the whole public thing.
Yeah.
But they essentially operate their own equipment and cameras and stuff fairly independently.
Okay. Wow. Well, thanks for giving us an update on that stuff. It's very interesting, to learn about it. And it's just a constant cycle of checking up on the last policy, double checking to see if the last policy was followed, keeping up with the new equipment. We're going to actually have to update our letters, I think, because there's a number of pieces of different surveillance equipment that I'm starting to see that they're, and a really interesting thing of using it forensically, when we were wondering about the planes with pilots that were being hired to fly over cities and take pictures. And we were curious, I think it was Atlanta, we were curious if there were anything there. And because we knew the foundation was going around funding this stuff in the different cities. So I sent a public records request to Atlanta, and they told me that I had to give them $380 or something because there were so many documents pertaining to that request. We decided to not bother with the documents, but our question had been answered. Right? With that,
for sure.
If there's all those documents, then we knew that that company, that foundation must have come to Atlanta to sell their snake oil. So it's really interesting, the different ways that it can figure out what's going on around a certain piece of equipment, and how it's always even when you file the public records requests, you can still get information when you don't get information, or when they only give you some of the information. And it's just sort of like this constant puzzle that you're always trying to put together.
Sometimes what they redact is like the most interesting part. And you can almost get more information from what they are hiding from you.
What they're hiding. Exactly. All right, great. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. And I hope you come back in the future, Tracy. Thanks a lot.
It was totally fun and nice to meet you. And thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Me too.
All right. Now, before we wrap it up today, we are going to have Grant Ellis come on, who is our producer in the background when we do this podcast, and he helps me with Aaron Swartz Day every year. And he just worked passing some very important legislation in his home state of Massachusets. And I'm just going to let him kind of take it away and tell you all about it. And take it away, Grant.
Oh, well, thank you, Lisa, and great to be with you. And that was a very edifying presentation from Tracy, and I think it goes to the importance of how you can have an impact on just a few words in a piece of a legislation, and in turn change the lives of a lot of people in ways that maybe they realize in hindsight was very important, but at the time the bill was passing, nobody did, because this is an arcane process. So that's, I think, what I'm going to talk about a little bit. Now, some folks may have heard about this word revenge porn. It's a very serious thing, and it's a very important legal concept, and it basically refers to consensual, intimate images that are produced between adults and then shared once the relationship ends as a form of emotional control or abuse. Now, in 48 states, thank goodness, throughout the country, this practice is illegal. In 2 states, Massachusetts and South Carolina, it is not illegal. Thankfully, last week, Massachusetts, well, over the past 3 months, first, the Massachusetts House in January voted 151-0 to outlaw revenge porn and coercive control. Then last week, the Senate followed up with a 40-0, very rare 40-0 vote to further the bill along. And now the 2 houses are on a fast track process to get this revenge porn and coercive control banned. So what I'll show a little bit, and I'll bring it up on the screen here. Let's see if this works. It's my first time sharing, so I think it's going to work. All right, there it is.
Yay.
What I'm bringing up on the screen here is what I'm going to kind of explain how I live tweeted the hearing that day, and then I'm going to end with a video clip of a very powerful advocate who had been a victim of this revenge porn speaking about the concept. So at the beginning of the day, you can see I showed up on Beacon Hill, we call it, in Massachusetts, where our legislature is located. And I tweeted a nice picture of outside the Senate gallery as the Senate was going to vote. And then doing my due diligence as a reporter, I went into the gallery and I talked to some people, and I got a redlined version of the bill, because it's important to note that if the Senate, the way a bicameral legislature works is that a piece of legislation can originate, unless it's a financial legislation, which I think in most constitutions has to originate in the House. If it's a piece of legislation that originates in one body, like a House of Representatives, it then has to go over to the other body, like the Senate, and both bodies get an opportunity to amend the legislation. Now, what you look for if you're an advocate supporting a bill is what's called a clean bill, coming through the House clean, going through the Senate committee, and then coming to the Senate floor the same as the House, or a clean bill. Now, we didn't get a clean bill on this revenge porn. You can see this is what's called a redlined version of the legislation, and any word in green is an addition that the Senate added, and any word in red is struck. Now, narrowing in on the one piece of, it's not really substantive, it's technical, but substantive change that the Senate made, they took out the word here in the middle paragraph of section 4. This is regarding coercive control, and I'll read the section. It amends the word definition of abuse and inserts in place the definition abuse: the occurrence in the following acts between family or household members, attempting to cause or cause physical harm, placing another in fear of imminent serious physical harm, causing another to engage involuntarily in sexual relations by force, threat, or duress, or coercive control. Coercive control, either a pattern of behavior intended to threaten, intimidate, harass, isolate, coerce, control, compel compliance of a family member or household member that causes that family or household member to reasonably fear their physical safety or have a reduced sense of physical safety or autonomy. So why did I read that whole thing? Because the word that got struck was autonomy. And you might say, well, why? Like, that's a very clear use of the word autonomy in the context of the larger sentence, which is basically defining how you can manipulate someone. Well, autonomy, and this is not legal advice, by the way, and I'm not a lawyer. Autonomy is not a legal concept. There is no standard, what you call IRAC, issue, rule, application, conclusion, test to define autonomy, and thus the statute could be struck down for vagueness. So I suggested, and then someone wrote it down, and hopefully they got it to the compromise committee members, the word agency be put in there, because agency from a contractual perspective refers to your ability to engage your free will and then engage in contracts. So agency has a legal standard. Very technical change, but it means everything in the bill. So this is the kind of thing that happens. Now, the bill did pass with amendments.
This is the making of sausage.
Yes,
this is how you make the laws.
And lawmakers say, "Oh, you don't want to see it," but it's actually quite interesting.
I really enjoyed seeing it, so I'm very glad you did, because I learned something. I didn't know how to read one of those. Now I know how. This is great. Just keep going.
Wonderful. Yeah. So then the bill eventually comes up for vote, passes 40-0. Now, what I think's great is you can see I was at the press conference afterwards. There were a bunch of news channels there, all the local stations, national PBS, etc. The senator who sponsored the bill in the Senate spoke. He got, great 3,000 views. The senator, Jamie Eldridge, also spoke. He was a big supporter. He got some 3,000 views. A great man named Alex Haggerty, who was a victim of revenge porn and had driven this bill for years, basically back 2 or 3 years, also spoke. And some historical context. This bill almost passed in 2021, 2022, but there were some minor differences having to do with what happens if there's a youthful offender and a youthful victim. Now, this session, the House and the Senate got it figured out with a diversion program, but Alex and some other survivors had been working for years because of sort of the hang up over the policy differences. And so this win, more so than anything else, is a reflection of Alex's work and those in his orbit. But I do want to say that there was also another powerful victim, and her words I am going to play, from a tangentially related situation that's going on right now. It's a very prominent case called the Karen Reed case. You can Google more about it. But the victim that's tangentially related to that case through a man named Turtle Boy, we won't go into details, spoke up about her experience as a survivor, and we're going to listen to that right now. So it's about 2 minutes.
Okay.
I'm here today to break my silence for the first time through public remarks.
Go ahead and make it bigger.
Statement. To begin, thank you, Madam Senate President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, and members of the House. Your bold action to ban revenge porn and coercive control has given me the confidence to stand here today, and for that I am eternally grateful. So many of us over recent years have heard the phrase, revenge porn is legal in Massachusetts. It's been thrown around as if this is somehow an excuse for weaponizing the most intimate moments of a person's life as a form of emotional control and abuse. But today, lawmakers in both houses of this esteemed body have spoken with a unified voice and made clear that revenge porn is no longer legal in Massachusetts. And survivors like myself are the ones who can now hold our heads high in defiance of anyone who might seek to use revenge porn as a weapon. I want to stress, though, every day that passes before this bill formally becomes law is for further agony for survivors. I encourage the Compromise Committee to get this legislation across the finish line as soon as possible. I heard it said once that whenever we stand against the flow of opinion on hotly contested issues, a woman does what she must, in spite of the personal consequences and dangers and pressures, for that is the basis of all human morality. If those words from a great human being who himself changed history still stand for anything, it is a profound principle that will be embodied when this legislation is quickly signed into law. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to use my voice, and I just want to let you know I cannot take any questions at this time, but I just want to thank everyone for allowing me to speak today.
Can you just say your name again and spell it?
Lindsey Gaetani, L-I-N-D-S-E-Y, and Gaetani is G-A-E-T-A-N-I.
And I will just finish by showing that that video got 135,000 views. And we can actually, because I run the account, we can look at the engagements on it. And you can see that had 136,000 impressions, 5,000 engagements, a bunch of expands, a lot of views, and a decent audience retention as well. So very impressive for someone who does not speak publicly and was breaking their silence for the first time. Just incredibly impressive, in my opinion.
Yes, very powerful. It's very powerful to have someone who was victimized themselves by the thing that's being fought against, which makes it that much harder, actually, to get the new legislation passed, go to the meetings, do the thing, because you've basically got to relive it a little bit every time you're dealing with it. And it was just really powerful words from her after having to go through all that. And thank you for sharing with us.
I'm really glad to be able to do so, and really, I think all the thanks go to the survivors, the lawmakers. It's not an easy process to get something done on a bipartisan basis, because then no one can claim it as a victory for their side. But this is one of those things where they were willing to do it, and I think all glory goes to those survivors. So really, kudos to them.
Yes, absolutely. And just for, you know, being able to fight back and get something done, and all the people, future people now that are protected from this legislation. You know, that's really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we'll have you back from time to time. Grant's always kicking ass out there on one thing or another, and it's really nice too. As you can see, he knows a lot about the process, and so this year, as we are learning about the process, I'm very happy about having him on the team. And you know, it's like they say, it's like watching sausage being made so that you won't try to watch it, right? But really, the way you explained it so quickly and easily, now I could look at a marked up bill and understand it, right? And that's so important, the point that you made about changing a single word that isn't actually a legal definition for something, because that's actually a tricky thing that judges will do. They'll stick in some funky word that they know isn't going to hold up. They know better, is all I'm saying. Not necessarily they're doing it on purpose, but they know better. When a judge has very precise language and they're making sure everything's perfect, you know that it's, you know, litigation that can hold. But it's not their job to, again, the judges aren't there when the laws are being written. You have to have that foresight to think about when it will be up, if it will be contested, and pretty much anything that's protecting people will probably be contested at some point by somebody shitty, because that's just what happens. And so it's important that that language is very strong and can stand the test of time and stand a legal challenge. So that's, it sounds like it's a good, strong bill that got passed. And well, now they're doing their House Senate thing to it. But the fact that you politicized it successfully to the point when both sides were fighting over passing it is kind of amazing. That's what you want to do, but you don't usually get two, you know, unanimous votes like that.
Oh yeah, it's very rare.
Kind of amazing.
Yes, and I on your point about the prescient foresight required to craft legislation, you have to protect legislation from two different things in the legal arena: a facial challenge to the language and an as-applied challenge in the specific context of the facts in the case. And to protect something from an as-applied challenge, what you're doing is thinking about the constitutional validity of the language in the context of formal precedent, constitutionality, and then also those legal standards. So exactly what you just said is true. It's the consequence of getting a word wrong is not just that, like, that part of the law doesn't apply. It's that a conviction could get thrown out because a judge or higher court might say the word autonomy is constitutionally vague, and therefore this statute does not meet constitutional muster, conviction invalid. So you have to get it,
throw out the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. So you have to get it right.
You do, but they don't.
No, but I think this
you
is also
have to get it right, but they don't. That's like, lawmakers are not always that careful, you know, depending on what, and because it's so short-sighted a lot of times. They got some reason why they need to pass the thing in the next month or two, and they don't really give a shit what happens after that, or if they don't care if it survives, is what I'm saying. The point is to get it passed so they can do the other thing, and you know, so it just really depends. See something like this that was a good thing that was passed for all the right reasons. I mean, you don't really even see that in Congress, to be honest. But it's one of these happy days for me. It's like, this exists. Yes, this can happen, and it does exist. And you can actually have Republicans voting for a thing that's obviously the right thing. Like, yeah, this can happen. It can be bipartisan, all the way bipartisan, to where it's not, you know.
Well, it's why the deliberative process, people don't like it, because it's very slow. It takes law past 2 to 4 years. The reason why is it's going through the parliamentarian and the legal counsel and 4 different drafts, because if you miss a word, you're gonna ruin people's lives. So anyway, I don't mean to defend the archaic bureaucratic structure of any Congress, because I assure you I don't support where we're at right now. But on this specific thing, it's working in an okay way.
It actually worked. I know. So this is actually the poster child for it working. you know, as most of the time we're talking about it not working. So it's kind of nice to know. And for me, it's very useful for me to see a test case. It's not even a test case, a real case from beginning to end. Because if you don't understand how it can work on a perfect day, then you can't recognize when it's getting all fucked up. You can't like I've learned so much. In all fairness, the January 6th insurrection was not a good thing. I wouldn't want it to happen. I wish it hadn't happened. But because it has happened, I have learned so much in the last 4 years about so many different things connected to government that I did not know, that I like knowing, you know, and so it's really interesting how you can learn a lot from a thing that's not too great, but again, moving forward, and that's why I think it's important that we go back and look at it and figure out, for me anyway, I'm still figuring out how I feel about it. I mean, I know how I feel overall about it, but every time I find out something that I didn't know, you know, else about it, then it brings up feelings. And then the way that Andre brings in Aaron's writings to it, it's kind of wonderful. It's just a really strange and interesting process that it's been, you know, through these episodes, to have Aaron's voice making comments on something that happened 10 years after his death, as if he had seen it. Right? It's pretty weird. You know, it's pretty weird. So he saw things coming, and things did play out like he predicted it might, you know, and it's just, it never gets old for me. So I hope everybody is enjoying it as much as I am. So thanks for coming on the show, Grant. And we'll see you next week, like always. Yay. All right. Well, that was a great show. Thank you so much for coming on. Andre, thank you so much for joining it, my co-host. And
it was a pleasure.
And yes, and we talked about it a minute ago, but I just want to bring it up again. You are coming to the United States, and you'll be at, to say again, where you're going to be, at what school and what program?
The University of Virginia. I'm going to be at the Karsh Institute of Democracy at the Digital Technology for Democracy Lab. And this is in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yeah. So it's like, woo, welcome to America. Yeah, bam, in Charlottesville. So it will definitely be interesting. There's a lot going on there, you know, good and bad. And it's just and it sounds like a really interesting program and really interesting people you're working with. And I'm just so excited that you got in, because we were just hoping for a while that you were going to get in. So I'm just really happy that you got in. And so that's why, you know, feel very privileged to have you on the show. I basically couldn't do this show without you, because you are giving us the political analysis from really that anthropological perspective, that really takes everything up to a different level and makes it very interesting and educational, I think. So I'm hoping everybody else will like it too. So we'll be back on April 20th is our next show next month. And we're going to have Tracy Jaquith from the Internet Archive's TV News Archive come and show us some of all their tools and how you can use it to authenticate the source of news, and the source of a deep fake. Again, it's not just about figuring out something's a deep fake. That's really your problems have just started when you realize something's a deep fake. Where did it come from? Who did it? Who made it? Who put it up? What are they trying to gain from the deep fake? Well, these things you can only really figure out from cross-referencing the source of that bad clip or that false information or whatever. And the TV News Archive has been partnering with fact-checking partners, and also just the way that they do things makes it you able to cross-check and find the source of news. And then you can clip it and share it really easily. It's just a wonderful resource, and I think very, very important during this election year. So we're going to be working with it all year long. And Tracy Jaquith is going to come on. Jaquith, she just told me after 20 years is how to say her name. So I'm going to say her name right, Tracy Jaquith. And she's going to be coming on to give us a tour so that we can start using it. And then it can just be something that we get better and better at as it goes by. So when the shit starts hitting the fan, which is usually, you know, September, October, you know, everything changes. You literally wake up one day and everything's like, wah! You're like, okay, the election stuff has started. Sometime in August, September, we will already be familiar with these tools that we need for verifying and cross-referencing sources. That's the point. And so, because we all are going to need to work together to share information on this. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have to set up a different website or something, but I think there might be have to be a place where we can store specific clips, you know, maybe if it's just the clips that we are using when we talk about the podcast or whatever, but we'll come up with some way so that you can find everything all in one place in terms of all the resources that we're using for this podcast so that you could use it, or if you're an instructor and you want to use it in your class. Also, if you're an instructor that teaches this stuff, and you have ideas for sources or you'd like to come on the show and talk about something, let us know, because you're definitely a part of the community and it's part of the process, and we would love to hear from you. All right, that's it. Everybody have a great day. Remember to subscribe. More subscribers, the better for the YouTube algorithm that we all worship. And we'll see you on April 20th. And thank you so much, Andre, and sweet dreams. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye-bye.
Bye.